word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to HeadRoom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Well, I don't know if this is because of my past in working in mental health and advocating for different communities around the country, and also telling stories around the world about those that have sadly been marginalized. But I'm a big fan. There's something about advocacy and standing up and doing what's right and creating equitable opportunities for all of us. And so I'm just really looking forward to this conversation with, I was saying off air, someone who's really doing the hard work. I'm just a platform here in this regard, and it's people like Kendra Davenport, the president and CEO of Easterseals, that is really doing the work that I think is not only admirable, but incredibly productive in supporting young and old across the country. Let me give you a little background on Kendra, and then we'll talk a little bit about Easterseals. But Kendra came to Easterseals with 3 decades of nonprofit experience, having managed development and communications portfolios, in teams ranging in size from 50 to 1,500 for several national and international organizations, which we will talk about today. But before joining Easterseals in March of 2022, as CEO and president, she led global philanthropy, communications, and brand marketing for Operation Smile. She's a passionate collaborator and places tremendous emphasis on transparency and trust as she works to support Easterseals' network of 70 affiliates, elevate the brand, and raise transformative funding and awareness of Easterseals' mission to promote equity, inclusion, and access for people with disabilities, older adults, and veterans. And look, Easterseals is a brand that I think many of you, if not all of you, know of. But just as a reminder, through their national network of affiliates, Easterseals provides essential services and on-the-ground supports to more than 1.5 million people each year, from early childhood programs for the critical first 5 years to autism services, to medical rehabilitation and employment programs, to veteran services, and more. Their public education policy and advocacy initiatives positively shape perceptions and address the urgent and evolving needs of the 1 in 4 Americans living with disabilities today. That is quite the preamble, Kendra.
That was quite a lot. Thanks,
but
Rod.
you know what? No, I think it's so important for people to have an understanding, because I think sometimes Easterseals is an iconic brand and name. But I think that with all the noise that we have going on in our world today, that it's just a good reminder as to what Easterseals is doing. And that's just obviously scratching the surface. Before we get into your background, I know that recently you had your 2nd annual Policy and Partnership Forum in DC. Now, I do want to talk about the particulars because you have some incredible partnerships, including, I think, Delta and all these wonderful collaborators, to include President Biden's administration. Before we get into that, I just take me into the experience you have in representing and being an ambassador in that series of moments. Where do you have a pinch me moment where you say, you know, when I was growing up as a little girl, I wanted to make a difference, and this is just emblematic of the sensibility that you have?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Thanks for that nice, albeit lengthy preamble. A little too much for you to have to get through. Appreciate the time and opportunity to talk with you today about Easterseals, my background, how I came here. You know, I think when I graduated from college in 1988, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I kind of thought I wanted a job in television. That seemed glamorous, and I had majored in English and communications. And one of my first internships was with the Business Buzz columnist, the business gossip columnist of the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is a Philadelphia newspaper. Her name's Caroline Stewart. She remains a mentor of mine to this day. And I remember at the time, my college was all women. And she came to talk about a career in journalism or television. And I was really enamored with her. So I interned with her the second semester of my senior year. And I can remember my father saying, forget about the internship. What are you going to do to support yourself? You are not coming home. And I remember
Said with
I
love.
shared that with her, one day over lunch. I said, oh gosh, my dad's really on me. I have to fly pretty soon. And so she made it her business to introduce me to everyone we met with. And a lot of her meetings were over lunch. So she would take me to lunch and then introduce me to the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the head of a, insurance company. And at the end of every meeting, she'd say, and Kendra needs a job, by the way. So one of those meetings turned into a job at the one of the nation's first children's museums. It was the first tactile children's museum that encouraged touching. And the name of the museum, which stands today, is Please Touch Children's Museum in Philadelphia. And their CEO and founder said, oh, well, Kendra, we'd love to have you come interview for a job in development. And I thought, okay, I don't even know what development is. Launched my career in nonprofit development. I have been a fundraiser for the almost 35 years of my career. And in that time, I've had the really good fortune of working for many nonprofit organizations whose missions were noble and impactful and meaningful. And I just genuinely like working in the nonprofit arena where everything is not always about the bottom line, but rather the impact you're making. And I had the really good fortune of Easterseals board of directors just taking a chance on me 2 years ago, because while I possess a lot of development, marketing, communications, and management experience, I didn't have disability services experience in my background. But fortunately, Easterseals, or unfortunately, was at a juncture where strengthening the national office's financial position was very important to them, and helping to make National Office of Easterseals, which sort of sits over 70 affiliates across the country that employ 32,000 people and provide, as you said so articulately, services, supports, and programs to people with disabilities of all ages and all disabilities, which is really a distinguishing factor because, again, as you said, quarter of the American population possess a disability, identify as being disabled. So that's 61 million people. Easterseals serves about 1.5 million of those, plus their families, plus their caregivers, plus seniors and veterans. So it's really meaningful work. And while I don't think I could say, honestly, I ever had an aha moment, as my career evolved, the need to be someplace where I felt I was making an impact as well as a living and found work fulfilling and meaningful is really what drove me. And while I've had opportunities to move into the private sector, it just never, for me, was something that I thought I could do. And here I am. I'm in, what I think is really honestly a dream job. And when I came to Easterseals, I didn't know how much it would become, or how much it would mean to me to be here. And now that I know our 70 CEOs and I've met their teams, many of them, and I've seen our programs in action and met families of people with disabilities who say, this is our lifeline. Or when we found Easterseals, we found our peeps. And that's just where I want to be. And I really believe that Easterseals, as you said, one of the nation's oldest nonprofit organizations, we just literally a
Turned
day ago
100, correct?
celebrated our 105th anniversary.
105th. My goodness.
105 years. Yeah.
It's
So we've been
incredible.
around
So
a long time.
I'm so curious when we think about advocacy, because I think that advocacy and advocates are emerging in so many different areas of our society today for a number of reasons that we don't have to touch on in our conversation. But one thing that I find fascinating in the advocacy sort of space, and I speak from the perspective of when I would actively advocate on the mental health side with families, is the delicate balance between the emotion that we have, the passion we have to advocate, and that
Mhm,
part of our brain that says we also, there's a responsibility to lead, to create
mhm,
opportunities. And sometimes passion can overrule uh,
mhm,
sort of the rules of the day or the tasks of the day. And I find those that are successful in leadership positions are very deft in their ability to understand and balance and when to allow the sort of the flow of emotion to
mhm,
empower them and those that they work with, and to help organize something that embodies that passion, but is
mhm,
also
mhm.
incredibly productive. How do you do that? And is that something that you are conscious of on a sort of a regular basis?
It's a really interesting question. And I think for me, I've always believed if you're passionate about the mission you're serving, the mission you're promulgating and advancing, the money will come. The operational aspect of what you're doing will follow suit. If you're detached from it, in other words, you aren't as committed emotionally to the mission or as moved by it or as passionate as you say, I don't know how you could be as effective. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about working for a nonprofit that creates such impact in so many lives. Um, and it does so because staff are so committed. It's not uncommon for me to go to visit an affiliate and while I meet their teams, ask them, how long have you been here? And it's not uncommon at all for them to say 20 years, 30 years, 15 years. That in this day and age speaks volumes about the work they're doing. And so you want to do right by those people. I've been in the nonprofit world, since I got out of college, as I just said, and it's really evolved. And I think more nonprofits have cropped up and the playing field is very, very crowded with a lot of nonprofits doing great work, but resources to fuel those nonprofits, to keep them going, to make that work sustainable. It's extremely competitive, and post-COVID world is even more competitive. So I think you really have to run your nonprofit like you would a for-profit corporation. And I think in many ways, Rod, it's a little more tricky than running a for-profit entity because where a for-profit might be selling a good or a service or product, and it's a very clear transaction, excuse me, in nonprofit world, you're selling altruism. You're selling a feeling. You're asking people to give of themselves, give financially to help support something they believe in. And you have to cut through all the white noise, all the other things taking their time and attention, which is why Easterseals has tried really hard to elevate our brand awareness. We are an older brand, and not everyone knows who we are. Or if they do know the Easterseals name, they might not know all about, the work we do, that we not only help support people with disabilities of all ages and all disabilities, but we also help seniors reintegrate into the workforce. As Americans are living longer, many are outliving their means. Many other seniors are overcome by loneliness. And so for them, working in an environment where they will meet people and be engaged is an extension of the best part of what life is, interaction with others. And then finally, we help veterans. Primarily, we help them transition from active duty into the private sector. And I am the daughter of a career Navy officer and the wife of a career Coast Guard officer. So I don't think we can do enough for our veterans. And I love that that's part of Easterseals' mission.
It's so powerful. And it brought up for me, I recently interviewed a Vietnam veteran, and it was an incredible story that he shared. And it's not just what we recorded, it's what happened after. The community of veterans that found the story that we told. And it has just, I don't want to go this far, but it really feels from his messages to me that it's changed his life because of this engagement he didn't know was possible. So that really speaks to me when you say that. I
I
wonder
love that.
if you
Love
could
hearing
communicate,
that.
yeah, Kendra, to this notion of in a perfect world, I don't know how, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need sort of, let's say, Easter seals or other advocates out there because we would be a society that would be, I think, inclusive
Mhm,
in a
mhm,
comprehensive manner, but that's not the real world. So, how do we understand fatigue, burnout? How do we support a fighting spirit from both the one that you're serving and also that are being represented within the 70 um, organizations underneath the parent, Easter Seals in that regard? Because I think that's something that's hidden that we don't
mhm.
often hear about in the nonprofit world is from the leadership burnout component and that fighting spirit that we want to make. It's like a pilot light, right? We want to make sure it's
Mhm,
always on. But I think we'd be a little bit, we, I don't know if we would be foolish to think that it's just automatically on, but I think we have to always support, right? And because it is exhausting on so
mhm.
many different levels.
I love that metaphor of the pilot pilot light. I think I think Americans by and large are incredibly generous people. if you look at what America contributes, it dwarfs what the rest of the world combined contributes monetarily to people in need all over the world. We're often the largest, um, benefactor of causes far beyond the borders of the United States. And I think the same altruism exists here in the United States. I think when people are educated about the need, they feel more connected to it. They understand it a little more. And for me, I think about 61 million Americans having a disability, and yet society has not evolved to the extent that it is accessible. Very simple things like curb cuts don't exist in many US cities, making even just getting around to shop for someone who uses forearm crutches or a wheelchair to move around or to live very, very difficult. These are simple fixes. And I think with greater education, we can make those changes. I honestly feel that Easterseals is at a pivotal moment because I think there is so much more awareness on DEI and A. Good, bad, or indifferent, people are very, very aware of equity, inclusivity, and accessibility. And with regard to people with disabilities, I think to break down barriers, create empathy, and engender education and understanding about what disability is and is not, it helps when you tell people that virtually all of us will become disabled by the time we're 68 years old. We will possess some form of disability, whether it's our eyesight or our hearing, or we have a physical disability come about, or we're in an accident. Anyone can become disabled at any point in life. And I think there is a message in that disability is not inability. It's a different form of ability. And I think Americans, by and large, just don't understand how to approach people with disabilities. It's sort of a mystery to many that makes them uncomfortable because it's a vulnerability, right? And seeing that vulnerability in someone else can be uncomfortable. So I think we need to talk much more about what disability is and isn't, and show examples. And social media is terrific for that, showing examples of people with disabilities who lead very full, very rich, very productive, creative lives. Their disability doesn't inhibit them. And I
And
think we
I
just need to
love
learn
that
to treat people like
disability
that.
is not inability.
Yeah.
That's going to stick with me. If we can switch to sort of the president and CEO role, I'd be very curious. There's so many sectors out there that are very concerned about a talent pipeline because Gen Z is purpose over profits.
Yes.
They are. I was recent data that I saw that it's like within the first 5 years, if they leave their first job, it's because that company did not match really the morality that they have themselves. And I'm wondering if this creates an opportunity to infuse incredible talent within an Easterseals when other industries are just sort of dying on the vine, wondering where they're going to get their next, team member, employee, colleague.
HeadRoom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
Absolutely. I think there is an innate goodness in serving a purpose or a mission that benefits people, health, human services, businesses that we're in, that Easterseals is in, because it connects you with outcomes that directly influence and impact the lives of people. We help people live fuller lives, and in doing so, help their families, help their communities become more inclusive and more accessible, and break down the barriers that distinguish someone from a disability from someone without a disability. 70% of disabilities are invisible, meaning we don't know when we walk down the street who's disabled and who isn't unless they have an outward physical disability that we can see. Again, I think it's all about developing an empathy. I'm the mother of three, all of whom are in their 20s and all of whom are very, very committed to doing good, paying it forward, being grateful, and living a life of gratitude. We are a family that really believes gratitude makes optimism sustainable, like Michael J. Fox said. And I think when I am approached by someone who wants a job with Easterseals, who's, you know, new to the career world, maybe they're right out of college, maybe they've had one other job, what I want to do is tell them how meaningful their work is. You don't necessarily mind working extra hours or maybe making a little less money to start. But even that's a misnomer now. You know, back in the day, in the 1980s, working for a nonprofit meant you made 50% less
Right.
than your for-profit counterpart. In the 80s, when people were getting out of school making all kinds of money in the finance world, going into the nonprofit world was really looked at askance by many people. You know, why do you want to do that? How are you going to advance? It's not the case today. Competitive, employment in the nonprofit sector is extremely competitive. And I would argue that in many ways, working for a nonprofit can be just as beneficial in terms of job satisfaction and even financially to people who are committed to a given mission. It gives your life real purpose, and I think that's worth getting out of bed for, right? And there's a great deal of solidarity in it too when you work on a team where you're all committed to a vision and a mission, and that mission is grounded in helping people. I think that's highly motivational, and I definitely think Gen Zers, Gen Xers, millennials see that, and that's been a benefit to the nonprofit sector.
Let's close with this, Kendra. I'm wondering, if I gave you a blank canvas, we live in a world where we struggle to understand where the horizon line is, right? And to communicate our story, like in essence, what is our purpose? But if you're standing in front of and you're talking with, it could have been at your event in DC, or you're meeting a younger person, an early career professional, and you're trying to give them the essence. It's like trying to describe the ambiance of a restaurant that you just know that I need to go to. Paint me the picture of what a life is within this, because when I think of what you're doing and what I know of Easterseals, I see bright colors. I see, just a fully engaged kind of experience. And that's just me. So that's very subjective. But I'm wondering, if you had that paintbrush, what would you paint? Where would the horizon line be? How would you sort of communicate the feeling that, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see it, and the audience can't see it, but you light up when you're thinking about responding to my question and talking about your kids and the family that you came from. So this is very visceral for you. So I would love to know what that canvas might look like.
I think I have gotten a lot more than I've given throughout my career. I think on the hardest day here, it isn't that the work, is hard for me. The work is incredibly fulfilling. So it doesn't necessarily seem like work. It seems more like an avocation. And I think if you have that in your work, and your work is something that moves you, makes you emotional when you talk about it. I was just in another interview and describing something and found myself getting emotional. I could hear my voice crack. That's embarrassing a little bit, but ultimately it makes me feel good that I'm that moved by what I do. And that work doesn't always seem like work. It seems like something I am dedicated to and have the good grace to be involved with. And I think Easterseals, one of the things that I think really distinguishes this nonprofit from many other terrific nonprofits I've had the great fortune of working for, is that everyone to a person is deeply committed to our mission, to helping people with disabilities lead more equitable, inclusive, and accessible lives, to making a difference and changing industries like the airline industry. We have the largest commercial airline industry in the world. I believe we can make it the most accessible airline industry in the world. That's the kind of power people behind a mission like Easterseals mission wield, and the change we can bring about. And if that isn't motivating, I don't know what is.
Well, I would say in closing that I think the best stories are those that are accessible. And I find you to be a character in a great story of hope that is very, very accessible. And I know you intimated earlier that Easterseals, or that you were lucky in essence that they had sort of plucked you from your previous work, but I would say that they're incredibly lucky to have somebody as
No,
transparent
thank you, Rod.
and as authentic as you. I'm your host, Dr. Rod
Thank you.
Berger.
Thanks for taking the plunge into HeadRoom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. HeadRoom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is HeadRoom.